Welcome back to the Sure Sales Group Show, episode 37. I have a fantastic guest today, Neil Junker, who is an expert in historic tax credits. Neil, thanks so much for coming. Give the audience a quick intro on kind of what you do and why you do it.
I consult and prepare historic tax credit applications for homeowners and developers. The main reason is to save money on property taxes and get income tax rebates for development of properties.
So Neil runs a company called O'Connell and Associates. So we'll link that up, o'connellandassociates.com. Pretty much all the builders in town, at least in Baltimore City, rely heavily on Neil to make sure that their applications are done properly, that they actually get the tax credits they're going for. He's like a local celebrity in the builder community, a miracle worker, some say. So how did you get involved in doing this?
Well, it's funny. I was an investment advisor, and we were rehabbing a property right near Cross Street Market in Federal Hill.
Okay.
And like a lot of people, we got ripped off by our first contractor. It was a 1,000-square-foot house, and it took 13 months to complete. And then we heard there were some great historic tax credits we could take advantage of, but couldn't find anyone to help us with the applications. So we did our own application and found there was a need in the community, and we started it as a side business, and 16 years later, we do more applications by far than anyone in the state.
Wow. So that's how a lot of businesses get started. You experience some extreme pain and you say, wow, why aren't people helping people going through this? And congratulations, you found a need in the market and created an awesome business.
It's a good niche, and we always help people. For every project, we come away providing a good service and making people money or saving them money.
Yeah, and you have a sterling reputation, and as a realtor, we deal with the homeowners and the developers all the time, and like in a lot of our shows, we're just trying to provide value, and one of the things that I like to do is hook people up with the expert. Now, I know a decent amount about CHAP, not as much as you, so we'll get into some of these, but just so people know, it took 13 months to build a 1,000-square-foot house. That should take about 60 to 90 days if the contractor's on the ball.
Exactly.
So yeah, that must have been a painful experience.
Yeah, it was, but something good came out of something bad.
Awesome. So what I think would provide the most value to the audience is, let's talk about some of the different types of tax credits. Let's just start with CHAP. What is CHAP, and kind of how do you get involved?
Okay. CHAP is an acronym for the Commission for Historic Architecture and Preservation. It's a Baltimore City agency, and they oversee all the historic rehabilitations in the city. They offer for rehabilitation projects the best program out of anything in Baltimore City. When you rehabilitate a house and increase the value, the State Department of Assessment and Taxation will increase the assessment on your property as soon as you've completed the project. What the CHAP credit does, it prevents you from paying property tax on the income, on the assessment you've increased the property by for 10 years. It also passes along to the next owner. In case you're a developer and want to use the credit, it'll pass on to the homeowner.
So CHAP is something that you hear a lot downtown. Hey, I want a house that has this tax credit. So essentially it keeps your property taxes from going up super high for 10 years.
Exactly.
So give the audience a little bit of this. I know it's changed over the years, but now there's this pre-improvement, post-improvement. How is the credit valued? Because there's a lot of confusion about it.
No, it's a very complex formula because it was created by Baltimore City government. But when we submit an application, they put an as-is value on the property, and then when you're completed the project, they put an as-completed value on the property. The difference of these two values is the value you've created, and that creates a maximum value of the CHAP credit. You take the difference of the appraisals times the city property tax rate, which is 2.248%, and also more than double than any other county in the state of Maryland. And that creates a maximum value. But to figure out the actual value of the credit, you also then have to take the difference between the as-is and as-completed assessments, multiply that times the city tax rate, and you really get the lesser of the two. But it's really important to know your as-is assessment when you get into this process.
So, and I know that's changed over the years, and Baltimore City kind of wised up and stepped in and said, we're going to give the as-is value and then the post-improvement value.
Right.
So a couple things to note there. This is based on the Baltimore City tax rate. It doesn't affect the Maryland State tax rate. It's a Baltimore City thing, at least for the chap in the city. We'll talk about Baltimore County has one too. People don't know about that as much. But watch episode 1, the first episode I ever did, Neil, on the Sure Group show, and I was just trying to say, hey, I know something about real estate, you should watch this. I explained that in depth, and I looked a lot. I went to your website, state's website, and I explained that in depth, pre-improvement, post-improvement, how you get the value. So that's the chap in the city. Where do people mess this up? If I'm a homeowner saying, I want to renovate a house and do the tax credit myself, where do they start? And also these builders who want to do it themselves but aren't experienced, where do they trip up, and why do they call you?
It's the most popular program in Baltimore City. So the review time takes about 30 days from the city. The mistake a lot of people make is they don't call me or they don't put an application in until they settle on the house. You're allowed to submit an application as long as you have a ratified contract, and you should do so right away. So while you're sitting in the city review queue, while you're waiting to settle. So
get started.
You won't waste any time. The other thing is you cannot do any work on the house until your application is reviewed. That's very important. You will be disqualified if they come out for the appraisal and find that you've already started work on the house. So be very careful on that. And the third thing I would say is if the front wall of the house has been torn down by a previous owner, it's no longer eligible. And that's something I'll do is I'll prevent you from going down a dead-end road when you won't qualify at all.
So yeah, tips and tricks to avoid failure and then just disqualifying yourself. I never heard that. So the front wall, as in you mean like the front brick, the front of the house, if that gets taken down, you're done.
Exactly. The property has to contribute to the historic architecture of the neighborhood. And once the front wall's missing, it's now new construction.
Is each neighborhood different?
No, that's a rule for every neighborhood.
Okay.
But there are two types of historic districts.
Okay.
One is National Register and one is a CHAP district. A National Register district would be Canton, by example. And all that means is that if you want to apply for these tax credits, you can, but there are no restrictions if you don't want to apply.
Okay.
In a local CHAP district like Fells Point, you're tied to certain rules for the exterior of the property, whether you apply for the CHAP tax credit or not. So that's a difference between the two. Yeah.
So what happens if you're in Fells Point, you're like, oh, I'm not getting the CHAP, so I'm going to do whatever I want?
No.
Big no-no.
Absolutely. They have jurisdiction on the exterior of the property.
So there's so many ways to find yourself kind of in trouble when all you're trying to do is flip a house and do a good job. So call Neil. He's easy to reach and an expert in these types of things in the city. One thing before we started, I didn't know this. There's a similar thing for CHAP, same kind of program in Baltimore County.
Yes,
What's that one about?
So Baltimore County is also rich in historic districts. Some examples that you might know are Lutherville, Stoneleigh, Rogers Forge. And Baltimore County will give you a 20% property tax credit on their qualified rehabilitation items, which would include anything on the exterior of the house, a lot of the rebuild on the interior, almost all the same building materials you would use in a CHAP house would be basically the same rules. And you can pass that property tax credit on to the next owner if you're a developer, or use it yourself until the credits run out to pay your property taxes if you're a homeowner.
You said that's 20%.
20% of your qualified rehabilitation expenditures.
And how do they come up with that 20%? So I think what I heard is however much money you put in, you get 20% of that back.
For the most part, there's some things that don't qualify, like kitchen appliances. Sometimes if it's just a kitchen remodel, that won't qualify. But anything where there's historic preservation, any original exterior materials or interior plaster or any mechanical systems, air conditioning, electric plumbing.
So if you put $100K in,
you'll get a $20,000 property tax credit.
That's big. And it's nice to know, again, going back to, if you're not an expert in it, it's kind of nice to have someone to say, don't touch that, this doesn't count, here's how you do it appropriately, because this is real money.
Yes.
Most people are putting more than $100K into these renovations, especially up in Baltimore County, a bigger single-family home. So this savings could be easily $60,000, $80,000 if you're completely gutting one of these big historic houses, which people love to do.
Yeah.
And buyers, I know for a fact, love having a renovated house with all the 2018 awesome stuff in that historic district, like Stoneleigh, like Roland Park.
Exactly.
Awesome. Now here's everyone, CHAP's a hot topic. You do more CHAP applications than anyone.
I've probably done about 2,000 of them over 16 years.
2000, it's not your first rodeo. Talk to me a little bit about the Maryland Historic Trust. It's called like the MHT credit. Not many people are A, aware of it, and B, know why they should be and how to go about getting it.
Sure. The Maryland Historical Trust offers a refundable state income tax credit, and that's their way of giving you 20% back on your qualified rehabilitation expenditures. It's not a good program if you're going to if you plan to gut the whole house and use new building materials, but if you were to buy an older house in a neighborhood like Roland Park or Guilford, where you can maintain the plaster walls and the current layout, it's a really good program if you're somebody who likes to rehabilitate all of the historic material. Another place where it works really well is if you're installing air conditioning in a house in Homeland or Roland Park or Guilford where it didn't originally have it. And air conditioning systems can be upward of $50,000 in large homes. And it's a nice way to get $10,000 back from a $50,000 air conditioning install.
So this is awesome. What I heard there is this is off a credit off of your personal income taxes. Forget about property taxes.
It's income.
With MHT, the Maryland Historical Trust, they will give you up to 20%, again, of the cost you put in on qualified stuff, off of your income taxes. So that's not a tax credit. They're just giving you the cash back.
It's a refundable state income tax credit, so you'll get a check back plus or minus any tax you owe or due back anyway.
Well, I'm pretty familiar with income taxes these days. It's, legislation and that sort of thing. I can't believe that if I put $100K into a house, and it qualifies, and I do this the right way and get the application done, I'm getting $20,000 back from the state of Maryland to say, hey, you did it right. Here's $20K back. I just deposit that tax-free.
Yep, exactly.
People need to be doing more of this because that's actually, from a developer standpoint and a homeowner standpoint, that's going to give you, well, I mean, it's hard to say because everything's so different, but this is huge for your property taxes. But at the end of the day, money in your pocket's pretty good. $20K pays a lot of property taxes.
And developers can use the Maryland Historical Trust tax credit by passing the tax credit on to the owner-occupant who buys the house. And one thing I want to qualify is this program is only for owner-occupants.
Okay.
There is also a program if you're a developer of mixed-use properties. There's a state small commercial tax credit that developers can use. It's the same exact rules, but 25% of the property has to be used for non-residential purposes. So some of your mixed-use properties in Fells Point would be a good example of where to use that tax credit.
Is there a size requirement on a mixed use?
The only rule is that the total development has to be under $500,000 when your rehab cost, and you can get up to $50,000 on $250,000 of qualified rehabilitation
25%.
expenditures. 20% of $250,000, so you can get $50,000 back.
Wow, that's the max.
That's the max, and you can't go over $500,000 on rehab.
That's incredible. So that's the Maryland Historic Trust. And here's one that I know no one takes advantage of. At least, I mean, how many times, well, I'll let you explain it. Federal Historic Tax Credit. The federales can give you some money back too.
Yes, and this is something we do for larger projects. An example right now, they're rehabilitating the Peabody Court Hotel in Mount Vernon. It's a $10 million project, and they're going to get about $2 million back. It's a 20% credit. It's unlimited amount of money, so you can do the largest project you like. And in order to qualify, it has to be a full rehabilitation of the property. And the industry term is you have to invest the adjusted basis. And on a new purchase, it would be the purchase price minus the land value from the SDAT website. So, but by general terms, if you're investing 75% of what you paid for it, you're going to be able to qualify. One important thing about this tax credit, it's made for real estate professionals. So when you do your income tax returns, you should be a real estate professional. And if you are, they are used like vouchers to pay your federal income taxes. And where if you make $1, you're going to be taking home 65 cents. Where these are dollar for dollar, so they could be worth as much as $1.35 in income for each dollar in credit.
And again, it's a federal income tax credit, so off your federal tax
Off your
bill,
federal taxes.
you get it back dollar for dollar.
Yes, and it's got to be for income-producing properties too, meaning apartment buildings. You can't be for something you're going to sell. You have to hold it for 5 years.
Well, I know a lot of our clients and a lot of real estate developers kind of drool over the opportunity to buy a property, renovate it into 5, 10, 15, 20 apartments, hold it, 'cause that's a great cash flow thing. You have all the tax benefits that we talked about with Brooke Kane on another show. But I think if they hired you and you said, hey, this does qualify for this, you're saving up, like you mentioned, the Peabody's going to save $2 million.
Exactly.
Tax-free. They're giving it back to you. Money that you were about to light on fire and give to the government that you're never going to see again. They just give it back. So you give it to them and they give it back.
Well said, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Very valuable.
Awesome. Well, Neil, how can people find you if they have more questions about this?
Sure. The best way to reach me is to simply call me. My cell phone number is 443-463-3363, or you can send me an email at neil.junker, JUNKER, at me.com. And what I will always do for you, especially with the CHAP credit, is estimate the benefit to you so you can make a decision based on a cost-benefit analysis. I'll be able to show you what you can save as a homeowner and as a developer, how much more you can sell your house for by incorporating the CHAP credit into your program.
Well, thanks so much for coming on. I appreciate it. I know a lot of builders in town rely heavily on Neil to look at these types of things. And I know I certainly would too, even though I understand the concepts of it. If you're not doing it every day, it's hard to make sure you're dotting all the I's, crossing the T's, from the application to the review to the fulfillment of the credit. So thanks so much, and thanks for coming out.
All right.
Hey, Neil, I can't let you leave until you look at the camera and give them an oh, by the way.
Well, oh, by the way, the rules are not the same for every house. Everything's judged on a case-by-case basis. So don't make assumptions because something's okay in one house, it'll be okay for another house. Call me and I'll tell you the rules for your house.